Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nadia and today I'm going to do a roundup of all the books I read in January. In January I managed to read 8 books, which is a lot for me, and I'm pretty proud of myself for doing so. And they were all in like the 3.5 to 5-star range, so I'm pretty happy with that. Yeah, let's get into it. The first book I read was for Carrie Can Read's book club, and it was A Sorcery of Thorns. And in this book we have Elizabeth Scribner, who works in a great library, and a great library is a place that contains books called grimoires that are kind of alive, like they have personalities and they kind of ruffle their pages at you and they can shoot ink wads, which is interesting because books don't contain more ink than is used to print the words on their pages. So I don't know how they can shoot ink wads, but they can shoot ink wads at you, and I find that very funny. But yes, so something happens within the great libraries where someone is trying to sabotage all of them and is going around and killing people, etc. So she has to team up with the wizard Nathaniel and his demon Silas to figure out what's going on and who's sabotaging the great libraries and why. And I really loved this book. Was it a little predictable? Yeah, it had, some predictable story beats, and there was the requisite love story, but I thought it was a great ride, really fun to read. It had a lot of Howl's Moving Castle vibes, and all in all, it felt like a really great warm hug to read, and I I gave it 5 stars. I loved it for what it was, and I think that if you go into this book blind, you'll enjoy it even more, because I went into it blind and I had no idea what it was about, and I found the first chapter to be a little confusing, but once that passed, I was really invested and I thought it was really well fleshed out and all the characters were great, and I mean, especially Silas. My favorite character is Silas, I have to say that. And yeah, I wholeheartedly recommend this book. I thought it was a lot of fun, and I recommend it to anybody who thinks that libraries are magical. I thought that that was a really great message from here. The next book I read was Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail. It's the sequel to Delilah Green Doesn't Care and the second book in the Bright Falls series. In this book, we follow Delilah's stepsister, Astrid Parker, as she takes on the job of renovating a local landmark known as the Evermore Inn, and she butts heads with the granddaughter of Prue Evermore, who is going to be the lead construction worker on the project, and we follow them as they go from enemies to lovers. And I thought this book was better than Delilah Green Doesn't Care. Delilah Green Doesn't Care felt a tiny bit insta-lovey to me, which, yeah, there was an element of insta-love here as well, but I think the rest of the story made up for it. I really liked Astrid Parker and the other character whose name escapes me right now. I liked their chemistry and I liked how their romance progressed, and I thought this was a 3.5 stars, whereas Delilah Green was just a 3 stars for me, and I recommend it if you want something easy breezy and fun to read. I thought it was a great romance, and I'm excited for the third book that's coming out. That's Iris Kelly. Iris Kelly Doesn't Date, and I'm excited that that's coming out soon, so I'll be looking forward to that. The next book I read was Babel, and this book gave me a book hangover. I was blown away by this book. So in this book we have Robin Swift, who is orphaned in Canton and taken away from there by Professor Lovell and brought to England to be raised to be a translator at Oxford at the Translators Institute, which is known as Babel. And while he's there, he makes friends with 4 other people, and they form this tight-knit group, this really tight-knit group that goes through a lot of trials and tribulations while they're there. And this book touches on themes of colonialism, of identity, of belonging, of found family, of just, there's so much in this book, and it handled all of it with aplomb. Like, I was completely blown away by this book. 5 stars, and I thought the ending was amazing. It broke my heart, and I can't even say more to recommend this book. I thought it was a masterpiece, like it says right on the cover. I was really, really glad that I read this, and I am looking forward to R.F. Kuang's next book, Yellowface, because I think at this point I will buy anything that R.F. Kuang publishes, because this was just amazing. The next book I read was Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell, and this book was okay. It's a sci-fi male-male romance, and it's pretty interesting. We have Prince Kiem and the representative for the planet Thea, Janin, who are forced to get married to each other after Prince Tam, who is the original representative for the Empire, dies. So Janin is a widower, and he has to marry Prince Kiem to re-solidify the alliance between Thea and the Empire. And it turns out that Janin later is accused of the murder of Prince Tam, and it kind of spirals from there, where Janin and Kiem team up to figure out what exactly is going on, how exactly Prince Tam died, and what they can do to preserve the relationship between Thea and the Empire. The world building in this book was pretty interesting. I thought the sci-fi aspects were really, really great. There was some really, really cool descriptions, etc. The tech was interesting. The relationship between Kiem and Janin was okay. It's a forced marriage trope, so they go from like kind of not really knowing each other to slowly, you know, getting to know each other to even falling in love. But there was something was just missing. It felt maybe a little short, or they were so busy miscommunicating for most of the book that I kind of wanted to shake the both of them and say, please just talk to each other. Like, if you just talk to each other, you could clear all this up. And even when they did kind of talk to each other, they didn't really discuss a lot of their miscommunications. It just kind of was resolved. So I wasn't really here for the love story, to be honest, but I thought this book was okay. I gave it 3 stars. There is a second book in the series, which I thought was going to be a sequel that continued with their characters, and I was happy to continue with their characters because I thought now that they finally, you know, cleared up their miscommunications, maybe they can have an adventure where they're actually, you know, working together and on the same page. But the second book actually features 2 other characters, so I don't know if I'm gonna pick that up. I might if I run out of stuff to read, but that's kind of unlikely. So I think I'm not gonna continue with this series unless I'm really bored somehow. But yeah, that was Winter's Orbit. The next book I read is actually a novella. It's Mysteries of Thorn Manor, and it's actually a novella set in the Sorcery of Thorns universe, and I thought this was adorable. I was really glad to have more time with those characters, and it's just a fluffy little story about Elizabeth and Nathaniel and Silas being inside of Thorn Manor, and there is something going on where the manor's wards, which are what protect a wizard's home, are kind of turning against them and not letting them leave, and they have to kind of work together to figure out why. And it's really low stakes and just very adorable. A little bit of a romp where they're running around the house, and I believe Margaret Rogerson wrote this while she was in quarantine, so they don't really leave the house until like the end of the book, and they don't really go that far, so it's kind of like a quarantine fluffy story, if you can say that. But I think this was really, really great, and if you like Sorcery of Thorns, or if you pick that up and you want to continue with the characters, I do highly recommend this. I thought it was adorable. The next book I read was A Restless Truth, which is the sequel to A Marvelous Light and the second book in the Last Binding trilogy, and I really had a lot of fun with this book. In this book, we follow Maud, who is Robin's sister, and Robin is the main character from A Marvelous Light. So we follow Maud as she boards a ship with Miss Navenby, and they are on their way to England when Miss Navenby is killed. And we have a really, really great heist situation as she teams up with other members of other people who are on the same ship as her, on the same voyage, and they kind of team up to figure out why she was killed, and there's another magical object in the mix, and there's a parrot and a menagerie of animals, and just a lot of crazy hijinks and shenanigans, and I thought it was great. The heist aspect of the story was wonderful to me. This is a sapphic romance, whereas the first book was a male-male romance, and I have to say that the romance in here, I wasn't completely on board with it, maybe mostly because I believe that Maud kind of deserves the world, and Violet is not my favorite character. I liked her as Maud's friend, and I liked her for her role in the heist situation and all of that, but as a love interest, I didn't really appreciate how she treated Maud. I think that Maud deserves a lot better, and I think Maud gives her way too much credit than she's worth, but it was interesting, and I see how it fits into the story, and I see how it fits in with Maud's personality, and I'm excited to see where it goes from this book. And I know that the third book is coming out later in this year, I believe, or maybe early next year, I'm not sure. But I am excited to get to that book, and I thought this was really, really great. If you like fun mystery heist situations, I recommend the first book and this book as well. I think they're a lot of fun. Next, we have One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston, and I loved this book completely. There wasn't a single aspect of this book that I didn't love. In this book, we have August, who is a transplant to New York City, and she boards the Q train one day and sees a girl. And this girl turns out to be named Jane, and as they continue their relationship, it turns out that Jane is displaced from time, from the 70s, and trapped on the Q train. And, I mean, that in itself is just so interesting, but I really love this book for the found family aspect. The side characters that August lives with in her apartment are brilliant, and the found family trope is one that is one of my favorites. So seeing all of them grow closer together, seeing August's prickliness kind of, be taken away by this hopefulness, by this sense of wanting to set down roots and wanting to live somewhere where she belongs, and belonging with these people was just so wholesome and wonderful to read. It was so completely wonderfully realized. Casey McQuiston has a real knack for writing side characters that are extremely well fleshed out and have their own motivations and their own stories and their own arcs and their own growth, and I just love that about their books. And I think that the found family, the side characters in this book really shine. I was rooting for all of them in addition to August and Jane. Like, I wanted August and Jane to be together and to succeed and all of that, but I was really rooting for Nico and Mila and Isaiah and Wes at the same time. Like, I wanted them all to just have the best that they could possibly have, because they were just such wonderful little cinnamon rolls of characters. I loved this book from start to finish. It gave me a warm, fuzzy feeling that lasted for days afterwards, and I wish I could erase it from my head and read it again. And I am definitely looking forward to reading I Kissed Shara Wheeler, and Casey McQuiston is another author where I will read pretty much anything that they put out, and I'm really glad for that, because I love having authors that I just know that I'm gonna love their work. Sneaking in at the end, we have Daisy Jones and the Six, which I actually finished this morning. This book is really great. It's by Taylor Jenkins Reid. She wrote The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and to be completely honest, if I had to choose between the two, I liked The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo more, but I did really enjoy this book. It is about Daisy Jones and the Six. Daisy Jones is a groupie slash it girl slash songwriter singer who is growing up in the late 60s, early 70s in LA, and she wants to be a singer, wants to be a songwriter, and she ends up teaming with this band known as The Six, that is led by Billy Dunn and his brother Graham Dunn. And it's a book written to be an oral history of how this band came together and how this band succeeded and how this band, came to be like the biggest band during that time. and it's written in an interview format. So if you grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s, and enjoyed watching VH1's Behind the Music or even E! True Hollywood Story, I think you would really like this because it really reads like an episode of VH1's Behind the Music. It's just tracing the history of this band as they start from, you know, humble beginnings and they rise to the top, and then they inevitably implode, because all good bands inevitably implode, apparently, as VH1 would have you think. But yeah, I thought this was really great. It was a really quick read. It took me about, I started this yesterday and I finished it this morning. I would say it was about 6 hours. So not very long to read this, but I'm not sure if I will pick up anything else by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm a little curious about Malibu Rising, but I'm not sure. Her books are really quick to read, and I think she's a great writer, but this book was, I gave it like 3.5 stars. I thought it was okay. I still think that Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is the stronger book, and it feels like there's kind of a divide where, like, on BookTube, where people either think this one is the better Taylor Jenkins Reid or Seven Husbands is the better Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I fall on the side of the Seven Husbands being the better Taylor Jenkins Reid. But I would still pick this up. Again, if you love stuff like VH1's Behind the Music, if you love reading interviews in People magazine, if you love finding out, you know, how celebrities hit it big and then inevitably implode, this book is for you. It's really well written, and I thought the format was going to be difficult to read, but it's actually pretty easy to read, and I think that was why I was able to read it so quickly. The sections are short, and it plays a lot with memory and how the members of the band remember things. So like you'll have pages where they'll recount an event and each member of the band recalls it completely differently. And I think my favorite band member is Warren, because he's always like, well, I don't know, I was just like, you know, smoking in the back and I didn't really care. So he's kind of my favorite because he was like absent from like all the craziness of this band, and he just kind of didn't really realize that it was imploding because he was just like in the back smoking, or in the back drinking, or out with a girl, or whatever. So yeah, I do recommend this book if you like any of the stuff that I mentioned. So yeah, those are the 8 books that I read in January, and I had a lot of fun with all of them. It was a great reading month. I didn't think I could read 8 books in 1 month, and I kind of proved myself wrong. I don't know what February is going to bring, but I hope it is just as good of a reading month as January. For my next video, I think I'm going to do popular YouTube books, like books that I've seen in other people's, in multiple other booktubers' videos, and try to read those to see if I like them as well as other booktubers like them. So it's going to be a bit more of a, like, these won't be books that I own or books that I'm like sure that, you know, I will like. So it's going to be more varied, so I hope that'll be interesting. Oh, and if you watched my 23 books to read in 2023, you'll realize that I read 1, 2, 3 books out of my 23 books to read this year. So I've got 20 books left, and I mean, I'm off to a great start. I think that's wonderful for me. I think if I manage to read like 5 or 6 of these, I'll be pretty happy. And yeah, they're still sitting next to me because I'm a garbage troll. But yeah, so yeah, see you in the next video, hopefully soon, and leave me a comment down below if you would like to, and like and subscribe. Thank you. Bye.